Over the past 2 months, as China tightened its rare earth supply restrictions, India saw another opportunity. Leveraging its own rare earth reserves, Delhi began contacting countries like the US and Russia, seemingly intending to replace China's position in the rare earth industry. However, just 60 days later, the once earnest India initiated a series of questionable moves as rare earth supplies became increasingly tight. In early June, according to US media outlet CNN, the Modi government halted a 13-year rare earth supply agreement with Japan while simultaneously increasing rare earth imports from China. By mid-June, the number of Indian companies applying to China for rare earth magnet import licenses nearly doubled, jumping from 11 to 21. On June 16th, Indian Commerce Minister Sunil stated publicly that the country was facing a tight rare earth supply situation. His ministry was assisting organizations like the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers in maintaining contact with their Chinese counterparts, hoping for a relaxation of restrictions. Subsequently, Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Randhir also stated in an interview that India was actively contacting China, hoping to resolve the rare earth supply restrictions in accordance with international practice to ensure supply chain stability and predictability. India's ambition was to act as a rare earth middleman, hoping to import rare earths cheaply from China and then sell them at a higher price. However, India underestimated China's tactics. As some German companies put it, to obtain Chinese rare earths, they were forced to disclose confidential information such as company performance, client lists, and facility details in their rare earth applications. Even then, the amount of Chinese rare earths they could acquire remained very limited. It's hard to imagine what India was thinking, trying to outsmart China, believing that China, like Russia, would give face and allow India to profit significantly from the increasingly tight rare earth supply. To this, one can only say that India is daydreaming. China will absolutely not easily export its precious rare earths for enemies to use in manufacturing weapons against itself. As for India's claim of being the world's 5th largest rare earth power, it should be viewed with skepticism. These figures are entirely derived from US and European rating agencies. In reality, India produced less than 10,000 tons of rare earths in 2024, a mere fraction of China's 270,000 tons in the same year. One has to ask, how does India intend to compete with China? Do they truly believe that whoever boasts the loudest is right? In actuality, India should understand that the rare earth industry, often called the vitamins of modern industry, is not a sector that can be built overnight simply by making a decision. China accounts for over 60% of global rare earth exports, 90% of rare earth processing output, and 80% of rare earth processing patents. In contrast, India's share in each of these categories is less than 1%. Therefore, the global reliance on China's rare earths cannot fundamentally change in the short term. More crucially, the strategic metals industry itself is a capital-intensive, highly polluting, and patent-driven business. Do India's private enterprises have sufficient profit motivation to participate long-term? Can the government resolve private land issues? Can related infrastructure, personnel, and technological support keep pace? These are not problems that can be solved by mere rhetoric. The Times of India commented that some people jokingly attribute China's rare earth advantage simply to environmental issues in Europe and the US. This is absurd. There are too many small, poor countries in the world that have utterly devastated their environments just for money. Why couldn't Europe and the US refine rare earths in those countries? In fact, China's rare earth industry has long adopted extensive environmental protection measures, and its environmental costs are far higher than those in smaller, poorer countries. The reason China's rare earth industry still maintains a monopolistic advantage is because its refining technology is exceptionally advanced. Since 1997, China began rectifying its rare earth industry, led by state-owned enterprises, integrating the market, and investing heavily and without hesitation in rare earth refining technology research. Over 20 years, China's rare earth industry produced over 100 academicians, while foreign countries had almost none. This has led to China's rare earth refining technology being far ahead of the world. Due to the gap in technological processes, the cost of rare earth mining in the US is $28,000 per ton, while in China it is only $8,000. Refining electricity costs are 3 times higher than China's, and labor costs are more than 5 times higher. Even with a 300% tariff, importing Chinese rare earths is still cheaper than producing them domestically. This threefold cost difference is the true bedrock of China's rare earth industry. Building rare earth refining plants in Europe and the US requires huge investments and takes 3 to 5 years. Currently, high rare earth prices offer profits, making construction seem viable. However, if they painstakingly invest heavily to build refining plants, and China suddenly relaxes rare earth controls and sells rare earths cheaply globally, what then? Even lobbying the White House for tariffs wouldn't stop it. Firstly, tariffs cannot reach 300%. The companies that buy rare earths would protest, and their influence is far greater than that of rare earth refining companies. Secondly, when all countries globally can access cheap rare earths, transshipment procurement becomes too simple. If rare earths are sold cheaply in the UK, refined by a relative's company in London, you can't impose tariffs, can you? Once these rare earth refining companies all go bankrupt, China will restart a new cycle of dependence and suppression. Given this daunting prospect, European and American capitalists are hesitant to invest heavily in building new rare earth refining plants, maintaining only limited, less costly refining capacity and recycling capacity. Even if they are willing to invest in construction, new factories take 3 to 5 years to build. During this period, rare earth supply is not a matter of cost, but of presence or absence. The entire foreign capacity is only 10% when fully utilized. Of the remaining 90%, even if China's exports meet 80%, there's still a 10% gap that forces production lines to halt, leading to a frenzy for rare earths across the entire supply chain, to the point where some industries would rather shut down than buy rare earths. Currently, rare earth prices in Europe and the US have surged by over 200%, and the entire industrial chain is unstable. In this situation, where some production lines are bound to shut down due to a lack of rare earths, it might be better to relocate factories to China earlier to ensure stable and secure production. Intel has already paused its expansion plans for a new plant in Ohio because without rare earths, many chip manufacturing processes, some of which are consumables requiring continuous replenishment, cannot proceed. To ensure its rare earth supply chain security and stability, the US cannot rely on private capital. The cost disadvantage is too significant, and a market economy driven solely by profit cannot support the reconstruction of the US rare earth supply chain. The only way for the US to break this deadlock is for the state to fund and establish state-owned enterprises to lead the construction of rare earth refining plants regardless of cost. What's 3 to 5 years? If private companies fear losses, then the state should fund it. These production lines must operate even at a loss, and then gradually research and develop, slowly bringing down costs. If they persist for 10 or 20 years, the US rare earth supply will no longer be strangled. However, it's regrettable that the US will never do this, because if it did, the US would no longer be the US. What was initially a minor rare earth issue would, if handled this way, become a matter of shaking the nation's foundation. Furthermore, China has never prohibited exports. It has managed the situation with a balanced approach. China's official stance is that rare earth exports are allowed but require regulation to prevent them from being resold and used for manufacturing military weapons. Building a Virginia-class nuclear submarine requires for tons of rare earths, an F-35 fighter jet needs for 117 kilograms, and a Tomahawk missile requires for 100 grams. Without rare earths, these things cannot be built. Foreign companies wishing to purchase Chinese rare earths simply need to proactively declare and accept China's scrutiny. This scrutiny includes written verification, on-site verification, and supply chain penetration review. In other words, China will monitor how your rare earths are used after purchase to strictly prevent reselling. Agree to this, and you can buy. Disagree, and you can't. China possesses the world's largest proven reserves of rare earths. Core reserves are in the north, mainly producing light rare earths, while smaller reserves in the south exist in clay form, containing heavy rare earths, which are scarcer in nature. China has skillfully leveraged both these advantages. In the midstream processing segment, although seemingly simple in theory, Manufacturing pure oxide forms of each rare earth element is extremely complex and time-consuming because each element must be separated from surrounding materials and other chemically similar elements. After rare earths are extracted and separated, they need further refining and processing into powders or different forms. In this area, China also holds a dominant position. China now easily leads the world in processing technology and output. But unlike critical mineral processing, China's rare earth refining capacity not only relies on imports, but is also supported by vast reserves, giving them a huge advantage. Developing mining and processing capabilities requires long-term effort, meaning that for the foreseeable future, other countries will remain at a disadvantage relative to China. Regarding rare earths, most people, even seasoned industry observers, still believe they are simple metals dug from the ground and sent to factories. This misconception exposes how superficial their understanding of rare earths is. The same applies to rare earth magnets. Producing the world's strongest industrial magnets is not just about mining minerals. It requires in-depth R&D, a strong knowledge ecosystem, and precise engineering at every step. To truly understand why China holds supremacy in the global rare earth supply chain, one only needs to look at China's absolute control over neodymium iron boron magnets. From motors to transformers, these magnets are at the core of everything. Finally, the Times of India reluctantly admitted underestimating the resilience of China's rare earth strategy, refuting claims that China's rare earth export controls would undermine its dominant position. That's all for today's program. If you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your clicks mean a lot to me. See you next time.